All right, so first play we're going to look at, 2nd and 2, one of the Patriots' first offensive plays.
What is going on, everybody? Mike Kadlick and Taylor Kyles here for CLNS Media, back with another episode, a live episode of the Patriots Daily Podcast, powered by our good friends over at Prize Picks. And today, powered by Training Camp Eve. I know practice doesn't start tomorrow, guys, but it feels like it's here. Press conference is kicking off tomorrow. Mike Vrabel, a couple of veterans on the slate, so we'll be down in Foxborough to kick off the 2025 season. And what better way to do so here on the show than CLNS Media alumni and Patriots.com's Evan Lazar here. We're going to break down a bunch of position battles throughout that we're going to watch throughout training camp. It's also a busy day here on the channel. I know it's already 4 o'clock, but we have this show at 4. We have a Discord chat with myself and Taylor at 5 o'clock right after this. And then Taylor and I pre-recorded a couple shows down at Gillette Stadium last week. We have offensive players with the most approved coming up at 6 o'clock on Patriots Press Pass, and then defensive guys at 7 o'clock. And Taylor also has a bunch of film breakdowns coming out as well. So busy here as we get ready for training camp. But first and foremost, Evan, thank you so much for joining us. I know you just said before we logged on, training camp number 8 for you. How fired up are you for the 2025 Patriots to start things off tomorrow?
Oh yeah, definitely fired up. And tomorrow, I always call it the first day of school. It's not, you're not really doing anything yet, but you all have to be there. And it's sort of the
syllabus day.
For the very first, syllabus day. Exactly. So I'm excited to get it going. And obviously training camp number 8, which is hard to believe. Me and Barth are on 8 together here back to 2018. So we're getting old, but with that becomes some wisdom. You know, you've learned from your mistakes of overrating the first couple of days or the non-padded practices and all that kind of stuff. So I'm excited to get this thing rolling, and then we get into the real part of training camp with the joint practices and all that good stuff.
Speaking of learning experience, I'm curious, is there anything that you feel like we hyped during the spring that now that we have the benefit of a little bit more hindsight, we've gotten away from it? It's like, all right, mate, we're going to need to see a little bit extra in the summer just because, we get excited even though there's no pads on and can't play through contact. Storylines do creep up.
I would definitely always point to the skill positions and just looking at a guy like Efton Chisholm or even Land Larison to an extent. When you have those quick receivers that can get open, that run good routes and things like that, and there's just wide open space and there's no contact and there's no fear of the safety coming down and clocking him and there's no press coverage and there's no any element of that whatsoever. Those guys always tend to shine in the spring, but that doesn't mean that he can't keep it going. It just is a matter of that was really more of like we set the table for him to maybe make the team in the summer, not necessarily that Efton Chisholm is already on the roster just because of some good OTAs and mini camp practices. So we'll see now, but look, it all started here for all these guys, whether it was Julian Edelman or even to a lesser extent on guys like Gunnar Olszewski or someone along those lines. They all started with solid springs and then built it up with summers.
I'm glad you mentioned the wide receivers because that's where we'll start this episode. Evan and Taylor gave back-to-back 3 position camp battles to watch on each side of the football. So we have a couple here to kick things off. And Evan is starting with the wide receivers. So Evan, I'll give you the floor. I know that this room, you look at it, it is obviously a bunch of returning guys, Kayshon Boutte, Jalen Polk, obviously Kendrick Bourne, Demario Douglas, but there's a couple new faces as well. Your Stephon Diggs, your Matt Collins, Kyle Williams, the rookie, and then you mentioned Efton Chisholm as well. So I'll kind of give you the floor to lay things out, but what are your thoughts on the wide receiver room heading into training camp? What are you looking for? And how do you potentially see these battles, kind of going, down the stretch here?
Right. Yeah. I think, I took the layup here because if we're going to do position battles and we're going to talk about it, then one of us is going to have to bring up the wide receivers. It's just the default answer. And I think we could also talk about, we will talk about interior offensive line. We could talk about nickel corner. We could talk about all the detailed positions. But at the end of the day, this is going to be one of the biggest, if not the biggest topics all summer long of how this room is going to shake out. And the way that I would preface it is it's almost 2 different conversations, because there's a top end talent conversation of did they do enough to bring in, a Stephon Diggs and maybe Kyle Williams emerging as a rookie. Like, is that enough to elevate the talent level overall of the room? And then obviously you have what's this year time of year is all about, which is the battles for roster spots between Polk and Baker and Bourne and maybe even Matt Collins, Kayshon Boutte, Efton Chisholm, like they can't keep all these guys. So there's two different conversations there, I think. Is there enough star talent? Is there enough high-end talent at the wide receiver position is one. And then obviously, how are they going to sort out spots 4 through 6 on this depth chart as well?
Yeah, when you mention the two different conversations, for me, it's with X and Z receiver, because we know Demario Douglas is probably going to be your slot. Jalen Polk maybe is the top back up there. He rotates in, however that works out. But the X receiver spot, it feels like the default's going to be Kayshon Boutte, but it's not like Z where there's a ton of different options. And when everyone's healthy, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out, probably behind Stephon Diggs, but still some guys that you expect to be involved. But at that X spot, it's Kayshon Boutte, maybe Kyle Williams, and then, Javon Baker, if we're still hoping that something falls in line with him, because we know he has the talent, but we saw even in the spring that he still has a ways to go in terms of living up to that Vrabel standard. So it feels like the X position is one where you want that isolated guy who can win deep, and hoping that's Kyle Williams. But Kayshon Boutte seemed to have that spot pretty locked down, and we know what he provides as a blocker, but he's not a great separator. He's not the guy who gives you the size where he wins even if he's covered. So I'll be interested to see if Kyle Williams can maybe emerge a little bit there. But the Z spot specifically, with no Matt Collins, which is disappointing, you kind of figured he would be involved in the blocking game pretty significantly. But does Kendrick Bourne play maybe on early down, so there's less responsibility for Diggs as a run blocker? I'm fascinated to see how those two specific spots end up playing out, because there's a lot of options. But like you said, there's some cases where it's a talent thing and some where it's just, do you really have the guys that you're excited to be putting out there on the field?
Evan, where do you sit on those two second-year guys, in Javon Baker and Jalen Polk? Because going into last year, I think most of us were excited to see how Polk would sort of play out. A guy who was a trustworthy target for Michael Penix at Washington, came in as what a lot of people thought was sort of a safe pick and someone who could turn in sort of NFL caliber reps pretty quickly, and it just didn't work for him. Baker, a little bit more of a dart throw, as we know, but what is, I guess, your confidence level in those guys, and how could do you see those guys potentially making the roster here?
Not overly high for either one of them, honestly. But if I had to say, Jalen Polk is probably the guy that I'm most hopeful can maybe break out in year 2 here. And really, it's nothing to do with them individually necessarily, but there's just not a lot of precedent of having that kind of rookie season and then going on and having a successful NFL career. I mean, there are some examples of guys having low production as rookies, but guys that, combined to make 12 catches, in one rookie season, it's not necessarily a ton of sample size there. Of we can pick on a Devontae Adams, right? We can take him and say, all right, well, he didn't have great production early on in his career, but he still had some production. There was still some box score numbers to pull out. Even a guy like Edelman, like I brought up earlier, obviously was behind a lot of bodies there with Welker and the different guys that they had in front of him, but he still played a little bit as a rookie and contributed a little bit as a rookie. So I didn't see that from either one of those guys, but with Polk, I have hope that maybe some of the finishing through contact and the play strength and that adjustment can really come along in year 2. Whereas with Javon Baker, I'm just really concerned about him being a pro. Is he going to be able to give the consistent effort day in and day out to be on that level? And I think it took Kayshon Boutte a little bit of time to get there with that. But maybe last year he turned that corner quite a bit and was able to be more consistent and be more reliable and do that sort of thing. So I'm with Taylor in terms of the X receiver spot. It feels like Boutte is the leader in the clubhouse right now. He's got the inside track and he's got a relationship or a chemistry with Drake May, which certainly helps as well. But is Javon Baker able to be a backup X? Is he able to beat out some of the other guys, even like a Matt Collins, for example, just in terms of playing time? I think Matt Collins will be here, but where how much is he going to play on offense is a question. So I'm cautiously optimistic about Polk. I think there's more there than what we saw last year, better coaching staff, better system, all that kind of stuff, but I'm not expecting anything from either one of those guys.
How surprised were you by the Diggs news that it seems like he's going to be a guy that just kind of jumps right in and starts participating after obviously being first he wasn't there, then he was limited, but we still actually got to see him. And now, obviously, with all the uncertainty in this offense, what do you think he's going to do in terms of his role? Like, do you think he's going to play more inside in certain situations, bump inside? Because that's been something I've been thinking about the past few weeks.
Yeah, it's a good question. And just with the injury itself, I think we're 8 months and like 23 days removed from him tearing his ACL last October. So when you look at the average of recovery times, you're usually talking about like 10 and a half months to back to the field. And it looks like Stephon Diggs is going to beat it by at least a month and a half, if not 2 full months here, if he's a full participant on Wednesday. So I am looking for that, though. They could have just avoided the PUP list so that he could participate in routes on air and walkthroughs and like all the mental stuff, so that when he is fully cleared for full contact and hopefully by the end of camp, then he's hitting the ground running from a mental standpoint, and that's not bogging him down in terms of learning the offense. So I understand that it's exciting that he's not on the PUP. But I would say that doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to be a full go on Wednesday. We saw what he did in the spring. Maybe it's more just a continuation of that, and he's not participating in full 11 on 11s yet. In terms of his role, I'm been kind of on this because if you look at his numbers in Houston and then you look at his numbers his last year in Buffalo, he's really turned into more of a chain mover. He is a 100 catch, 1,000 yard, 10, 11 yards per catch kind of guy. Whereas with Minnesota and then early on in Buffalo, he was a much more explosive downfield option as a receiver. I don't know if that third level speed and separation element that he had early on in his career, I don't know if that's still there with Stephon Diggs, especially, after an ACL injury. So I look at it and say, why isn't I would project him to just be that Z receiver that is moving the chains that we've seen for years and years in this Josh McDaniels offense. Maybe it's not exactly Welker Edelman. Like maybe it's more, Deion Branch or something like that, that's a little bit more dynamic and a little bit more explosive. But I think that at the same time, if he's on pace for 100 and 1,000 yards last year, right around 10, 11 yards per catch, that's sort of what I would expect him to do with the Patriots. Now, the Patriots would definitely take that. Like they take that and run if they could get 100 catches from Stephon Diggs. But if you're expecting him to come in here and be hitting, 40, 50 yard explosives and things like that, I don't think that he's that guy anymore, but he's a really consistent, reliable separator when it's 3rd and 7 and they need 8 yards. And I'm pretty confident Stephon Diggs can still get 8 yards.
To your point, I think Diggs, his deep production was almost non-existent last year, but intermediate, he was the most productive receiver in the league. So just so everyone knows, that is his sweet spot right in that area. And then obviously, like you said, moving the chains on those third downs as well.
Yep.
Yeah, the recovery time could be incredible. He's 31 years old. And it's a good point to make too, where, I think as we tend to do and as fans tend to do, make a pretty big deal out of him not being on the initial PUP list. But it still could just be a ramp-up period, and if he's not out there tomorrow or on Wednesday rather, and it's kind of a slow burn, it still means that he's gonna be out there continuing to learn the system. Something he mentioned in his vlog the other day, where like he's kind of taking it very seriously to learn this McDaniels this McDaniels system and what they want to run here, and that just goes to show like the worker and sort of the player he is, because I know a lot's been made about him off the field, especially this offseason, with the video and the Cardi B stuff, but he's a freaking football player. He's a high-end talent. He wants to come in and play football. And I'm excited to see how he can grow with Drake May. So that's one to be fun to watch. And then with Booty too, that we talked about earlier, just to kind of put a cap on the wide receivers. Taylor, we've kind of talked about him as an example of what Jalen Pope could be, where a very unproductive rookie season, but kind of stays with it, continues to grow. And now it's not apples to apples. It's a 6th-round pick versus 2nd-round pick. And someone who has a lot of pressure on him versus not so much with Booty. But if he can, and Evan, you said we've never seen someone have like a longer successful NFL career. Now Booty turned it around year 1 to year 2. He's also someone who could potentially be cut by, camp's end if everything goes to plan with your Kyle Williams and even your Javon Baker. So it's one to watch, but it's kind of an example to look at here as well, where you don't do much your first year, but then you kind of turn it around in year 2. But that is the wide receiver unit. We will move on now to safety, where Taylor's going to walk us through another position battle to watch, where at the top of it, obviously, we're looking at a healthy Kyle Duggar and what looks to be a healthy Jabril Peppers and a very motivated Jabril Peppers. He's been on the Twitter machine kind of getting ready for this season. But he was also really involved, at least in the beginning of this latest episode of Fortune Foxborough, continuing to take on the leadership role in the defense. He's breaking down the huddle. He was a captain last year, got it taken away. We'll see what happens, in the future with that and kind of his role, like I said, as a leader. But besides those two guys, Taylor, what are you watching in the back end of the defense, and how do you see it potentially playing out, and what are your eyes going to be on?
Well, it'll be interesting to see how much Kyle Duggar participates, because correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think we actually saw him on the field in the spring. So that opened up more opportunities for Jalen Hawkins, who I kind of thought would be more on the outside looking in, but they did bring him back, this Mike Vrabel regime. So you figure, okay, there's something on his tape that he liked. And clearly the fact that he really did seem like the starting safety opposite Jabril Peppers once he got back. Another guy who can line up in different spots. So I can see why he'd make the team. But Craig Woodson, I know, Evan, we mentioned it a few times watching in the spring. Like, he just makes plays. He seems to be around the ball a lot. Doesn't seem to make a lot of egregious mistakes, which is what you want in a rookie safety. And the thing that, Ryan Cowden kept mentioning after he was drafted was the communication and how smart he is, now versatile. So you also have Marcus Epps, who going to be interesting to see how much he does play. It seemed like his snap count went up towards the end of the spring, but he's coming off a pretty significant injury, was a captain for the Raiders also, so kind of brings you even more than just somebody who's going to make the team if he does as a safety. And Del Pettis, he could be a special teams ace, was plenty in the defensive rotation in the back end, so maybe he improves, can get himself some more defensive snaps. It's just a really loaded room, and it's not one where it just feels like there's a lot of people taking up space. I think it's going to be competition, and at the end of the day, we're going to see, all right, who's the one making the plays, going out of their way and actually shining, versus maybe who's having the quieter summer. And obviously, I'm really hoping that's Craig Woodson, because he's one of my favorite picks, like the further we've gotten from the draft.
Yeah, just, before we get into some of the depth guys, I think it's maybe being under talked about or just lost on a lot of people that Kyle Duggar and Jabril Peppers 2 years ago was one of the best safety tandems in football. And last year was a year from hell from both of them guys on the field, and injury wise for Kyle Duggar with the ankle, which I think really derailed his entire season. And as Taylor mentioned, we don't know for 100% that that's what's been holding him back in terms of his participation in the spring, but I have to think it was because he had surgery on that ankle. So that's a big part of it. Jabril Peppers was injured. He obviously had the off-field stuff that went on last year. So there was just a lot of different things that led to those two guys not performing up to the contract and up to their expectations. So a huge thing to me for this entire Patriots defense, if you can get those two players, Peppers and Kyle Duggar, back to the 2023 version of themselves and playing together like they were in the 23 season, that really does a lot for your secondary and a lot for your defense. Like, those two guys are both splash play makers. Like, maybe not the most consistent, positionally sound type of safeties, but guys that can make plays on the ball, that can turn the ball over, that can make high impact, contact, of course, with Peppers and things like that. So I'm just looking to see if maybe they can get that back to level with those two guys. And then maybe you fill it in with the guys that Taylor mentioned as third safeties. And I'm very curious where this goes for Craig Woodson. I feel like he's got the instincts and the body type to maybe be more of like that post safety up top and allow Duggar and Peppers to play closer to the line of scrimmage, play in the box, blitz, do the things that they do the best to their skill set. And, I always go back to when they had, McCourty, Chung, Harmon back there, and everybody had a role. Everybody had a home. It's third down, game on the line in the fourth quarter. They knew where they were going. They knew where their hot spots were. They knew where each other was going to be, and they need to get back to that sort of chemistry. And they are a little bit redundant, Peppers and Duggar. They have some redundancies to them. So somebody else that can maybe color in some of the other areas would just be massive. And maybe that's Craig Woodson. And the last thing, just with the slot position, there's a chance that one of these safeties is going to play a lot in the slot this year. And Vrabel has used, big nickels and things of that nature in the past. So whether that's really any of those guys, I feel like have done it and maybe could do it. So I'd also look to see where those guys line up. Is there a big nickel package with all three of them on the field where maybe it's Woodson in the slot to start? I feel like he's probably the most natural fit there, but we'll see if he's got the IQ and the instincts to be able to play such a high stress job. But in general, I just really hope that they get back to that safety tandem being a strength of this team, because they gave those guys contracts for a reason. Like they both got extensions, they both got paid. It was because they were good football players and had good seasons, and where the arrow was pointing in the right direction on both of them. So hopefully they can get back to that.
I will let me throw one more name in for you guys to bat around. I think it's been a contentious conversation between the two of you guys in the past. Evan, I think you pointed it out last month. The Patriots actually switched Marte Mapu's position to linebacker officially on the depth chart. And big day on the on the Patriots website. But someone who has had a lot on his plate the last couple of years, whether it's injury, whether it's learning to be a hybrid defender. It looks like he's going to be in the linebacker room. Do you think there's any chance we see him kind of continuing to be that hybrid, molding into a safety? Like, what do you think Mapu looks like this year? And we mentioned cautious optimism with the wide receivers. Is that a similar sentiment for a guy in Mapu?
Yeah, I just hope with Mapu that maybe they can zero in on a role for him so that he can focus on just getting good at one thing. Because I think one of the things, and he's a really great interview too. I'm sure both of you guys have gotten to talk to him, and he's like really smart kid and he knows football, and he's a really very articulate in terms of talking about the game. So I feel like he had a bunch of things just in his head. Like he was just trying to be everything, and he was trying to be wear the green dot and call the defense and play different spots in the defense and play safety and play linebacker and do all these different roles. And with Mapu, I just wonder if they say to him, coverage linebacker, let's just work on maybe on third downs, you can get on the field at the second level of the defense. Maybe we take a Tavai off, or we take a Spillane off, or we take one of the heavier linebackers off the field, and it's you that's playing, the pull runner in cover 2, or it's you that's playing the weak hook in cover 3, or you're playing the tight end, out of the formation, or whatever the case may be. And it's just, that's your role. We don't have to worry about you playing on all 4 downs yet. We don't have to worry about your run fits and all the different keys and things like that seem to mess him up at times in early downs. So get him into a specialized role, and then maybe also in the kicking game as well. And then let's see it expand from there. Because at first, I think he just tried to take on way too much responsibility as a young player in the league, and it overwhelmed him.
I'm on the exact same page, because I still am very cautious about Mapu as a run defender, because for all of his talents, doesn't take on blocks well, and tackling has been a pretty consistent issue for him. Now in this Mike Vrabel system, things are going to be asked him. He's going to do things differently, where he can attack a little bit more. His play style fits, but either way, you want him to be that dime linebacker type, where we've seen him in coverage as the pull runner, man to man. He looks really comfortable, and those are jobs where you don't have a ton of things you have to think about. So yeah, I don't have a ton to add, but I do think that the move to linebacker, if it's a passing role, is perfect for him, even though I do think he still has some flexibility to move around once he does, find his niche, and then you can put more on his plate. But let's start him from the base first, and let's give him some confidence in doing one thing, and then put more on his plate as he figures that out.
Yeah.
All right, let's hit one more position battle here before we take a break to hear from our friends over at Prize Picks, and we're going to talk about the interior offensive line.
There we go. Now we're getting to it.
Left guard, obviously right now the biggest question mark along the interior, but center's an interesting one too. They bring in Garrett Bradbury, Jared Wilson's drafted on day 2. Wilson we didn't see much of in the spring, but Evan, what are you watching for down the middle of this Patriots offensive line as they really try and build a force around Drake May?
Yeah, it's the most important position group of the summer to me, is this offensive line and as a whole. And you have a 4th overall pick at left tackle. That's a big deal. That needs to work. They need to get Will Campbell going, and they need to get him playing well. But on the interior, just looking at left guard and center right now, if I am an opposing defensive coordinator, I am putting my best rusher over those 2 spots, and I'm letting that guy go to work. So that would be my main concern. I still think this offensive line as a whole is better, but how much better, I don't know yet. I just don't know if they've really elevated it just enough, especially with some of the weak links they might have. So, left guard, Cole Strange is probably the leader in the clubhouse right now for that spot. I am interested to see if they maybe give Caden Wallace some opportunity to win that job as well and move him inside. When we were doing all the homework on him out of the draft a couple years ago, there was a lot of people that thought he was going to end up at guard in Caden Wallace in the NFL. So right tackle feels right for him in this kind of system as well. But I would say guard could also work. And so maybe it's Strange, maybe it's Wallace. And then Jared Wilson's also a wild card really for both spots. Can he push Garrett Bradbury out, or can he maybe compete at left guard too? So they're going to throw a bunch of stuff against the wall and hope it sticks at left guard. That seems to be the idea here. And I don't hate that because it's an interior spot and you can cover it up to an extent, and you have good coaches on the offensive line now with Doug Marrone, and they have a ton of coaches over there. They have like 6 guys coaching that group. So hopefully they can find one guy that the cream rises to the top and they get a decent starter out of it. But this still feels, the offensive line still feels shaky to me, and mainly it's just looking at it as what are potential targets for defensive coordinators and for defensive lines going into the season. And I just look at those 2 spots and pass protection, especially if I'm a group that has some good interior rushers, and you have Garrett Bradbury, who struggled last year in Minnesota, is a little undersized, doesn't have the play strength, and Cole Strange, similar thing. I'm targeting those guys, for every single passing down and hoping it works. So I would like to see maybe a little bit better performance out of that group, specifically as we move forward here, because you're going to have to get better play out of this whole unit. But it starts to me really with the left guard and center, because I think they'll be all right at the other 3 spots, but those 2 spots still concern me a lot.
It's also really disappointing that Layden Robinson really was so far down the depth chart in the spring. And you're hoping, as a guy who thrives with physicality and getting downhill, maybe once the pads come on, that's when he starts to shine. And I think that's kind of what happened last year. Was I know City So got hurt, but it also felt like Layden Robinson really started to pick up steam towards the end of training camp as we got into preseason. Hopefully that happens again. I still feel like if you're talking long-term, he's probably your best physical option at left guard, but there's much more than just, being the strongest and most athletic guy at the position. I will also say, because we mentioned it with Kyle Duggar, his contract, where yes, he's one of the best at his position, but he needs to play up to it. Same thing with Mike Nwenu. I think we can understand a lot of guys having down seasons last year for a number of reasons. Mike Nwenu specifically having to play tackle and guard and not know what was going to happen at points from week to week. That's a really tough spot to put anybody in, especially over multiple years of him also having to play tackle. But now he's already spent the entire spring at right guard. He's spending the entire summer at right guard. Hopefully he can finally play up to that contract, because the way they're paying him, it doesn't look so bad when he's like a guard who can play tackle, but when he is at guard, he is living up to that. He hasn't. And as many excuses as we can make, this has got to be the year where Mike Nwenu has one of his best seasons, I think.
He's got to be Pro Bowl caliber at that contract. If you're going to be a guard, he has to be a Pro Bowl caliber guard at that spot. And they kind of need that right side. They need to be able to set Morgan Moses and Mike Onwenu on the right side and not think about it for 17 weeks. Like they have to be able to do that, because they're going to have some revolving, moving chairs there, musical chairs at center and left guard. Like that's just going to happen. They're going to have different guys that are going to play there, hopefully for the better. Hopefully guys get beat out and push each other and things like that. But if they have to all of a sudden start thinking about the right side too, then this becomes a house of cards.
And that's why the, health is obviously so important. And, you hate talking about, well, there could be injuries, and, there will be at some point on every single roster, but the depth can be shaky there as well. So having those 2 guys playing up to speed, playing what they can do, and healthy will be incredibly important, as will down the middle for Drake May. Even I think of center quarterback exchange with a Garrett Bradbury if they try and rotate in a Jared Wilson too. So it'll be interesting to see how things sort of play out there. But definitely, Evan, I would agree that it's up there as the most important battle to watch this spring. Speaking of those battles, we do have 3 more to hit. But before we do, a quick word from our friends over at Prize Picks. We will be right back. CLNS Media is powered by Prize Picks, the best place to get in on the action, even throughout the summer. There is still baseball, there's women's basketball, and Taylor, we are right on the cusp of football season. There will be preseason games loaded up on Prize Picks, so if you want to get in on the action, head over to Prize Picks. Use code CLNS. You get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. All right, that's Prize Picks. Let's have some fun with Prize Picks, actually, before we get back to it, because I know I mentioned football season's around the corner, but baseball's here as well. Red Sox are back at it. First of all, Evan, before we get into our Prize Picks, your thoughts on the Red Sox quickly. Are you on the train? Are you off the train? Or are you not even thinking about it because it's football season's here?
Oh, man, I got to be off the train right now because this is just, I've seen this movie before. Like, they lose 2 out of 3 to Chicago right out of the break, and they seem to be in this spot every single year for the past 4 or 5 years, and then the second half does not go well. So we'll see what they do at the deadline. I think they can maybe change my mind. If they add a piece or two in the deadline, maybe that can put them in a different direction. But we've all seen this before. We know what's happening, what's coming right now.
Evan took the words out of my mouth.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'm sure Taylor had that one lined up. But all right, well, let's go to pitcher strikeouts. Evan, give me one. Zach Wheeler, Walker Buehler tonight. Patriots, Red Sox versus Phillies. You got a pick more or less on either of these guys here?
I guess I go with Zach Wheeler because Walker Buehler has not been great for the Red Sox lately and been walking a lot of guys, no pun intended. So I'll go Zach Wheeler because Red Sox strike out a decent amount. He's a better pitcher than Walker Buehler. That's where I'm going.
Awesome. Taylor, I'll put you on the spot here. Let's go.
I'm so ready. So many familiar names.
Total bases. Let's do total bases here. We got plenty of Phillies. Jaron Duran, he's a Red Sox.
Kyle Schwarber, that's fun. That's a fun name.
You want Schwarber?
Oh,
yes,
former Red
Sox, and he's a local guy too, right? Isn't he from here?
That was the I think that was the joke. I don't know if that was ever real, but
so we don't know if he's actually.
We don't know, but I'll give one more. We do need a Red Sox in the lineup. Bregman's more or less is 1.5. We're going to move Narvaez to more than half an RBI. And that is our lineup here. Zach Wheeler, more than 6.5 strikeouts. Kyle Schwarber, more than a half of a total base. And we'll go with the captain, Carlos Narvaez, more than half an RBI. We'll see if it hits. And if you guys want to get in on the action as well, head over to Prize Picks and use that code CLNS. You get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Thanks, guys, for indulging in that with me. You got to give some love to those guys over at Prize Picks. They make things run here at CLNS. But back to it. Actually, before we do that, speaking of keeping things running at CLNS, 5 p.m., Discord chat, myself and Taylor. If you guys want to get in on it, here are the steps to do so. Just join the server. It's pinned in the description and in the chat. I'll actually put it right up on screen as well. You can join using that link. Check out the Patriots Daily stage. And if you are a Patriots Press Pass member, you can join myself and Taylor on stage and ask questions. We're going to do an AMA for a little while after today's show as well. So drop your name in the chat if you are a Patriots Press Pass member. Amit will get you hooked up there, and then you'll be able to join us and ask some Patriots questions after today's show. So again, head over there on the Discord channel. It's pinned on the YouTube comments if you guys want to get in on that as well. We'll do that right after. Anyone can join. Members can ask questions only. So that's where we're at here. But let's get back to it. Taylor's second position battle, the tight end position. Now we know Hunter Henry is the guy, the leader in the clubhouse. Obviously, Austin Hooper starting the season on the PUP list. And a bunch of mysteries, I'd say, sort of in the 3rd/number 2 tight end position. Jaheim Bell, 7th round pick last season. Jack Westover gets some reps down the stretch, and Patriots bring in 2 UDFAs, CJ Dupree and G. Scott Jr. as well. And then Brock Lampy's in the mix. So, Taylor, what are you looking at this? I know I kind of just threw the names at you, but how could you see this playing out, and what guys are you going to be watching as camp starts on Wednesday?
I just need someone named not Hunter Henry to show me something, to be honest. This is a spot where it's a lot of bodies, but from what we've seen, there's not a ton of talent. Now, part of that is, a lot of these guys aren't going to be great receivers. Now, Jaheim Bell, I will say I was expecting to see more from him in year 2. That was pretty disappointing. I think he had a couple drops during the spring. But like CJ Dupree, Brock Lampy, those are guys you expect to be better blockers. And Austin Hooper is not going to be practicing, or at least early on. So you figure it's going to be a lot of opportunities for these young guys. Jack Westover, played a ton with Hunter Henry in the spring, and now it's just going to be more of that. I've talked about it a few times, and I don't want to beat this dead horse necessarily. I just am not very confident in the depth at tight end. I feel like after Hunter Henry and Austin Hooper, it kind of falls off a cliff. But they paid CJ Dupree a lot of money. Brock Lampy was the highest graded skill-playing run blocker in college football last year for any division. So you just hope those guys can at least give you that extra physical blocking element, like the Humans and those kinds of guys. So, I was disappointed by what I saw from the tight end depth in the spring. Hopefully they can give you some more confidence in the summer.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. No disrespect to those guys, but it just isn't a whole lot to excite you after Henry and Hooper at the top of the depth chart. But it was one of those positions that they couldn't possibly address everything in one offseason. Yep. And there were certain decisions that they had to make where they had to say, we have Hunter Henry, we have Austin Hooper, we'll bring him back. We'll just kick the can down the road on tight end. And it just felt like that was one of those spots where they decided to do that. And now next off season, especially in the draft, I would say getting a young, high upside developmental tight end in the pipeline is now one of the top needs that they have in the draft. If they hopefully were successful with everything else that they did in the offseason, this last offseason, especially at the draft. But if you assume that Will Campbell is a starting left tackle and Travion Henderson and Kyle Williams are contributors at the skill positions, well, maybe you can draft a tight end high next year to add to that group and maybe solidify that depth. So it felt to me like they kind of kicked the can down the road at that position and just said, we have these two veteran guys we feel good about. We're going to get at least one good year out of Henry and Hooper, and then we'll worry about this in 2026. But you brought up Brock Lampy. Got to do it. Fullback. Is it back? Is it not back? Is it him? Like, if it's back, is it him? Because right now, I've used this analogy on our shows before. I played lacrosse growing up, and my buddy was the goalie. And on JV, my sophomore year, we had one goalie, and it was him. So there was no question about who was going to be the starting goalie because we had no other goalies. Right now, there's no question about who the fullback is because he's the only one on the roster. So does that mean that he's going to win the job? No, not necessarily. Like, they could sign a fullback off the street and that he could win the job or something along those lines. So with Brock Lampy, I will believe it when I see it that Josh McDaniels doesn't carry a fullback. Like he's carried a fullback throughout his entire history as a coach. It's such a big part of his offense. I'm pretty sure like lead or ISO is his favorite play in football. Just sending the fullback through the middle of the line of scrimmage and blowing up a linebacker is literally his favorite play. So I just can't imagine that they're not going to have a lead blocker or a fullback of some sort that they can go to in that base regular offense. And right now it's going to be Lampy. If that spot holds and he holds, it will be Lampy.
And quick CLNS plug. I actually, I know we're working on it right now, publishing, but we broke down the play action scheme that Josh McDaniels uses. The fullback is a huge part. Just the presence of that, the threat of that ISO run where it forces linebackers to run right to the point of attack. Otherwise, they're just going to get run over, and that opens up a ton of space over the middle of the field and some easy opportunities that Drake May didn't have last year. So, again, there's no UDFA that's ever had a closer inside track, I think, to a roster than Brock Lampy has right now because they're probably going to keep a fullback, and, he's going to get all the opportunities unless, he's going to get all the opportunities. I don't want to jinx the young man. We're going to root for his success.
Keep an eye out for that Josh McDaniels film coming shortly on the channel here as well. Taylor's been doing a great job with those for our members, so make sure you check it out. Let me throw this into the mix here, only because I got a lot of requests for a Patriot meme, Squidward meme, towards this guy yesterday. Old Man Bob just threw it in the chat. It's Noah Fant, who was released by the Seattle Seahawks yesterday. He was due, I think, close to $8 or $9 million. 27 years old. Everyone talks about tight end university, what, Greg Olson and those guys run. He's out of tight end U. He's out of Iowa. He's from there. He's in that pipeline. Obviously was with Denver, was a part of the Russell Wilson trade. Any interest in a guy in Noah Fant? Would you rather fix the tight end 2/3 position through free agency, through the draft, and kind of, like you said, Evan, kick it down the road, or would you have any interest in this guy bringing him in?
I'd have a little bit of interest in Noah Fant. Maybe that's just the draft guy in me, just not giving up on it.
Oh, yeah.
I go back to that draft. It was him and Hawkinson, right? They were in the same draft, and it was neck and neck for a while. And the league probably got it right by drafting Hawkinson much higher. But it was one of those things where it was like it was a Styles wins fights type of deal, where Noah Fant was this freak athlete, great receiving upside, had all the tools to be a great receiver, but Hawkinson was a more well-rounded tight end, could put his hand in the dirt, could block, things like that Noah Fant was really in that mold of like a big receiver. Like he's a big slot receiver. But then I look at this room with Henry and Hooper. Oops, just knocked my mic over. Henry and Hooper. And I'm like, that's kind of what they need, right? Like that they sort of need that complimentary guy that's got a little bit more juice, that's got a little bit more athleticism and size. So maybe Noah Fant can do that, and Hooper and Henry are going to be your inline or your wide tight ends, and maybe Fant can make the roster as like a F or a move piece that can really be a receiving option, because he's not a blocker. That's never been his game, but he has a lot of tools to be a decent receiver. So I'm not a no on Noah Fant. If they wanted to kick the tires, another guy we mentioned, younger, has some upside still potentially. It could complement the room pretty nicely.
Yeah, and like a Tim Wright role, I'd be down. I just think that Fant's still at a point in his career where he would try to be like more of a tight end too than necessarily like the third guy who's only going to get one package a game maybe. But if he's not hearing other offers and the Patriots think he'd be a good fit, I'd absolutely be interested. Yeah.
All right, moving on. That is the offense. We will go back to the defensive side of the ball here for Evan's final position battle to watch. It is the interior defensive line. Really going for the trenches here in these ones, Evan. I love it. That is bread and butter on your guys. Yeah, right, exactly. But Patriots make a ton of moves this offseason on the front seven, obviously bringing Milton Williams. Christian Barmore looks to be coming back healthy, knock on wood. We'll see what happens there. But Keon White also has the inside-outside flexibility as well. What are you looking for on the interior that potentially excites you and potentially worries you as well for this Patriots front?
Yeah, first of all, this is where the games are won and lost, FYI, right? So we get into the trenches and we talk about that. I know we like to talk about the receivers. I led off with that, but to get into the real nitty gritty of the trenches here, the things that I like about this group is that really on all of the defense, the front line looks nice, right? Like they have a good front four, starting front four, and I feel like they're starting 11 just in general on defense. It's hard to find any spot where I'm really concerned, but like with the rest of the roster as well, depth is going to be the big question, and there are going to be injuries. There's going to be guys that get hurt for long term and guys that are just in and out of the lineup. And I look at the interior defensive line and knock on wood, and I pray to God this does not happen. But if Christian Barmore or Milton Williams, either one of those guys were to miss any time of significance, now you're really pushing up a Jeremiah Farms. You're expecting a Joshua Farmer to come in as a rookie and play a lot of snaps. Maybe it's Kairos Tonga playing a larger role than what you projected to. You really just want him to be a run-stuffing nose tackle in certain situations. Well, this is exactly what I'm describing is what happened to them last year, which all of a sudden they get a rash of injuries. Barmore gets the blood clots thing, and now we have guys that, no disrespect again, but guys like Daniel Aquale and Jaquelin Roy and some other players that were just playing too much. Like they were playing roles that were just in over their heads a little bit. And so all these players, I just feel like it's the same thing where Williams and Barmore look great on paper. That's going to be a lot of fun if those two guys are healthy for 17 plus games. But if they're not, where is the depth coming from? And does somebody emerge that excites you? Maybe it's Taylor's boy, Jaquelin Roy. Maybe he.
You're disrespecting my boy.
His face when you mentioned him in there, he was like, "Oh, not on this,
man. That was nuts."
Yeah, but that's whenever I maybe it's just been programmed to be pessimistic sometimes, but at the same time, like you always want to look. Yeah, right. You want to look at the roster and say, okay, well, where are the potential issues? Like we know where the good players are. That's exciting, and we can sit here and talk about that all day long and jazz up Barmore and Williams and Gonzo and Carlton Davis and get all excited about how good their defense looks on paper. But if they were to have some injuries on the interior defensive line, who is emerging out of that group to help them out there? And I'd also just throw in there beef in the middle, just in terms of stopping the run. Like, where are they going to find that? Is Tonga that guy? I know they just signed the international pathway player. Is he that player? Is he a true nose tackle that can come in and maybe log some run snaps and clog some holes and hold up the line of scrimmage and things like that. So I like the group, the frontline group, but the depth still has me. I just need to see a little bit more from some of these guys.
I'll say the one person that makes me feel better about the defensive tackle depth is Keon White, because we know that he can kick inside and be one of the better interior pass rushers in football. And it'd be one thing if it was years past where, okay, yeah, Keon kicks inside, but now who's outside? You've got Swinson, where you're thinking in those pass rush situations, that's probably where he thrives. You've got Caleb Chase on. Hopefully Elijah Ponder, a guy I really like, can have himself a strong summer and maybe get himself onto the roster. But Keon being able to supplement, like if you do lose a Barmore or a Milton Williams, that's still two very good pass rushers. And then if you have to be a little more predictable by saying, like, yeah, it's going to be Kyrus Tonga, it's going to be maybe a Jaquelin Roy, I don't mind the nose tackle depth necessarily, because they're going to be role players. And if you have Jaquelin, Jeremiah Farms, who I think is a much better fit in this more upfield system than he ever was as a two-gapper, I don't mind that. And they have developmental depth. That's one thing I think in a lot of their positions on defense, other than maybe safety. Developmental depth is the area where I have a lot of concerns. But you have Farmer, someone where if he does have to play a lot of snaps, at least it's building towards something, right? Now, he has to stay healthy. I'm trying to look at the roster right now. Jaquelin Roy also, as much as I like him, he hasn't been able to stay on the field. He wasn't participating in the spring. So availability is definitely a big concern. But I think Keon's flexibility gives this position a huge boost that I agree. If he had to stay outside, I'd be way less confident. And like, yeah, I don't really know where your pass rush is coming from, but I think they've got enough bodies that if they rotate guys in, keep them fresh, it won't be the worst thing in the world. But I also wouldn't mind if they decided, hey, let's add one more kind of veteran who we can rotate in if we have to, who we think is going to be a little bit more of a force than, a Farms or a Jaquelin Roy, where they're maybe splashier, but you don't want them to have to play an entire game.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how they get White, Barmore, Williams, three guys that really are best rushing inside the tackles. How do they get all three of those guys on third down? Like, how does that formation look? Like, it might be unique. It might be a little bit different than some of the things that we've seen in the past. Because in theory, that group should eat. Like, they should be an absolute, really very good interior pass rush. But how do you get all three of those guys on the field at once in those types of packages? Will be fun to watch, to me, just from a kind of charting it and looking at it standpoint on film. But I'm excited about that group. Keon White, to me, is the biggest X factor on the entire defense. If he can take that next step and he can be a little bit more consistent playing out on the edge on first down, and then allow him to do his thing on third downs, that could really tilt this in a really good direction for this defense. That could put them over the top into like the top 10, top 5 conversation.
And I think we're going to see more of some like formations where Keon and Barmore flip, because Barmore already told us he's watching Cam Hayward, he's watching Jeffrey Simmons, Chris Jones, guys who do kick out as big defensive ends. And like, no, they're not going to bend around the edge all the time, but they're so powerful. It's very different for especially younger or less experienced tackles to have to deal with a bull rush from a guy who's athletic and also like 310, 15 pounds. But yeah, their pass rush fronts are going to be a really fun study this year.
We mentioned interior offensive line and wide receiver as sort of the most important battles. I think interior defensive line is definitely the most exciting, like you said, to kind of see how they use those three guys. Definitely not the deepest, but more so like the biggest star power, I would guess, as sort of a battle that we'll want to watch. So excited to see how that goes. But last one here that we're going to touch on before we get out of here. Back on the defensive side of the ball, Taylor, weak side linebacker. Guys, we're looking at our
speaking the same language.
Yeah, Christian Ellis, Jack Gibbons, Tavai. Was Tavai on PUP? Is he coming in on PUP? Do I have that right? Okay. Yeah. He had the I think they called it a calf injury towards the end of mini camp there. So one to watch there. But with Jack Gibbons coming in, familiarity with this system. Taylor, what are you looking at on these guys, and what do you want to see?
I just want to see how exactly this rotation works out, because with no Jelani Tavai, I feel like we had a decent idea, and it looked like he was going to be the early down role player. So, all right, if there's no more Tavai, is Christian Ellis going to be the full-time weak side linebacker? I think we saw he was a better run defender than I ever would have expected, considering his specialty was coverage and blitzing. Coverage was definitely up and down last year. You're hoping that with better coaching and in a system with so many veterans where they're saying, like, we're kind of a step ahead in the installation process because we've already done this. We want to know okay, if we're playing this, what if the offense does this? How do we respond? I think that's going to help Christian Ellis a lot, but also like Jack Gibbons, pretty high-end backup linebacker because of his experience. He's been a productive player, was last year, had like the best game of his entire football career against the Patriots, unfortunately, in that loss in Tennessee. And even guys like Cam Riley made a couple of plays late in the spring. So this feels like one of those groups where, like Belichick, it felt like linebacker was a position where they always just churned out good players. They didn't need to have the best pedigree, but you always got something out of them. And with, obviously Mike Vrabel, a staff that he's very familiar with, and a group of guys that's been in the league for a while and in this specific system, I feel like there's going to be a lot of opportunities for maybe some guys to surprise us and emerge. But I just want to see how it works out with Marte Mapu. Also, I keep forgetting about the position switch, but he's in the mix as well. So it feels like there's a lot of role players and there's some overlap as well. So who's going to stay on the roster, who's going to split time, and just how that position works out is going to be pretty fascinating, I think.
Yeah, I definitely could have combined interior defensive line with inside linebacker and just called it front seven depth in general is something to watch, because Robert Spillane's a really good player. I'm excited about him. He might not be a household name, but I think once Patriots fans see how hard he plays and how fast he plays and just the amount of tackles he's going to make if he's fully healthy the entire year, they'll be excited about him. But he's your Mike. But behind him, like, do you feel great about any of these players, stepping in for him if he were to get hurt or he were to miss time at all? And then the weak side spot, to Taylor's point, feels they're probably going to have to get into some situational stuff where certain guys are playing in certain situations. I'm still optimistic, and he had the calf injury, and it looked worse than hopefully it was when we were out there in the spring for Jelani Tavai. But similarly to Duggar and Peppers and what we were talking about at safety, in 2023, Jelani Tavai was a good football player. He was a solid NFL starter. If he can get back to that, because now he's playing off the weak side, like he was with Bentley when Bentley was here and Bentley was healthy, and it's not all on Jelani Tavai to be the Mike and to wear the green dot and to run the middle of the defense, because that's going to be more of Spillane's role. Maybe Jelani Tavai is just best cast as that. They used to call it like the fixer or whatever it was, the adjuster, that role where it's just kind of, he's Robin, right? Like he's not Batman, but he's Robin, and maybe he's a better Robin than he is a Batman. So I'm still optimistic that Tavai could get back to that. And maybe they have Tavai on early downs. And if they want to play two linebackers, pure linebackers, I feel like Ellis is maybe a little bit more athletic and a little bit better in coverage and in space. So you can have those two players be complementary to each other if you want. But my guess is when you get into those third and mediums and longs, they're going to play a lot of DBs. It's going to be a lot of corners and safeties on the field, and maybe only Spillane is the one guy that is actually on the field all three downs, which is what they did with Bentley. So I could definitely see those types of things, but I'm looking at that Will spot as well. Is it Tavai? Is it Ellis? I think maybe Jack Gibbons is heard from at some point here in the summertime. So I'm optimistic that group will come together, but we probably get more questions about linebacker depth on our shows than any other position. Like, people are like, it's crazy. We get once a week, we get people saying, behind Robert Spillane, there's not a whole lot to like about inside linebacker. And I just think that maybe it's more that some of these guys are role players. Some of these guys are not necessarily household names. So it's not like exactly like you're rolling out, Teddy Bruschi, Mike Vrabel, Willie McGinnis, Ted Johnson, right? Like this is a different kind of group. So you have to learn these guys, but I think you're going to like them once you find out a little bit more.
All right, Evan, we'll leave you off with this before we get out of here. Thank you so much for joining us. We always appreciate it. One final thought, position battles aside, who is one player that you're going to be watching more than most as training camp starts? Again, battle aside, I don't know if could be a backup, could be a high-end starter, but who's like the one guy where you're just going to have a little bit more of a close eye on than the rest?
Well, take Drake out of it because I feel like that's just by default, right? Right. Everybody's going to be watching Drake May, but I would say, not to cop out, but like to combine them both a little bit, Travion Henderson and Kyle Williams, like one of those guys. I really just feel like they drafted for juice, right? Like they wanted to add speed, they wanted to add explosiveness, and I'll tell you, really early on, you could tell with N'Keal Harry, with Sony Michel. Like, you could just tell that they didn't have that gear that they were necessarily hoping when they drafted them. So I don't think it's going to take long for us to realize if Kyle Williams and TreVeyon Henderson have the juice. Like, well, it might take a while to see if they're going to truly carve out big time roles in the NFL. But in terms of the play speed, like, you can pretty much tell right away in training camp if those guys can play at this level or not. So I'm optimistic that they can, but it would be so huge for this offense if TreVeyon Henderson turned into like a Jahmyr Gibbs light. And he's just a guy that when he touches the ball, he can flip the field. Like, that just completely changes a lot of things about their offense and about their outlook this season. So one of those guys has to emerge and has to pop as one of those types of players. And we might be talking about a long season. So let's hope that happens.
Taylor, you got one guy above the rest? Oh, sorry. Go ahead first.
No, you're good. It's kind of out there. It's not even necessarily a starter, but Alex Austin, to be honest, because he is going to be a starter, at least in the beginning, because Carlton Davis, I believe he's on NFI right now. And I think it's fair to be excited about Alex Austin. Like, he's made some plays on the ball. He's sticky in coverage. I do think he's a good player. I also think the hype has kind of gotten a little too high, where, like, the guy's played in 10 career games. He's only ever really been a spot starter. It's one thing if he's the kind of guy where you're scheming him into game plans, but that's not really true. If Carlton Davis and Marcus Jones are healthy, you want them on the field the whole time if you're playing your corners. But I do think Alex Austin's a talented player. Now he's going to have an opportunity to show what he can do with this top unit inside and outside. So we know that there's been a lot of pretty much rotating outside of like Christian Gonzalez in terms of where a lot of these guys line up. So I'd like to see him take advantage of that opportunity and show that maybe he could be some kind of long-term answer. Marcus Jones is a free agent at the end of the season. If Alex Austin can be some kind of slot corner, I think, especially in this Vrabel system where he tends to like them to be about 6 feet tall and like 185, 90 pounds, I think he could really thrive. So I just want to see him maybe live up to some of the hype that he's been built up as, because I saw somewhere somebody said he was like one of the most underrated players in the league. I'm like, you can't be that underrated if you haven't played a full season of games. So I still think he's a very good player. Let's see what he can do with the chance.
I'll throw Jalen Polk back into the mix. I know we talked about it, but I can't quit him. Evan, it's like you and Tyquan Thornton a couple years ago. It was one season. It was tough. We had Alex Katzen on the show a couple months ago at this point. He covers Washington football a little bit. He kind of gave me some hope on him. He was down there in North Carolina with the crew. Yes, it was a really bad rookie year, but I don't know. There's something about him, something about, what he has. I think he can potentially come back. So we'll see what happens. He was off to the side a lot in the spring coming back from surgery, but hopefully he can hit the ground running here. So one last thing before we get you out of here, Evan, just want to give you the chance to plug anything you got going on. Obviously training camp's coming up, but any Catch-22 this week, what's going on, and what can we look forward to for you guys heading into 2025? And also, congratulations, you're also a newlywed as well. Good stuff.
Yes, I was gonna bring that up to end it, but I'll do the shameless plugs first. But good. So on Patriots.com, we'll have our regular Patriots Unfiltered tomorrow, but on Wednesday we'll be live during practice on Unfiltered. Nice. So I think we're doing the whole practice. So we'll be on the air talking about what's going on, and we can show like the first, 20 or 30 minutes or so on the cameras of what they're doing at the individuals and things like that. So you can see a little bit of practice. Of course, they make us turn the cameras off once we get to 11s on 11s, and you have to stare at this ugly face instead. But that's how we do it. But I know so many people ask like why we turn the cameras off. It's like, do you want to give the rest of the NFL the like film on their practice? Right. Like, no, we don't want to do that. So they do turn the cameras off, but it's still a good watch, and we try our best to kind of narrate what's going on in practice when we can't have the cameras on. So that'll be this week. Catch-22 back on Wednesday now that I'm back in the swing of things here. So that'll be good. And yeah, Mike and I, we both tied the knot this summer.
Let's go.
Right? Oh, there you go. So the real question that I have is not, and thank you I see the chat, all the congratulations. I really appreciate it. But there's one person here on this show that is next, and it is Mr. Taylor right there.
Go, come on.
Don't do that to me. Don't get me in trouble.
Yeah, I'm just saying. I am just saying that, Mike and I, we took the plunge, and you're next, Taylor, aren't you?
I am. I'm excited. Some things need to fall into place still. We're building. I was supposed to move this year. That didn't happen. So, stuff's, still left in the tank, but
one day at a time.
I'm next.
Yep.
I'm
there
only
you
messing
go.
with you. Where
Yeah.
Barth is a lost cause, so I'm not even going to bring him up. So it's
Married
obviously
to the game, Alex.
yeah,
Barth.
yeah. Taylor is obviously
Liz
next in
literally
line
just
here.
called me. Now you guys got me in trouble.
I love it.
Well, this was fun. Again, thank you so much. Evan, we'll have you on again. We'll do our crossovers coming up. I'm sure you joined the party last year a couple of times. So as always, we appreciate you coming on. For myself and Taylor, tomorrow, Mike Vrabel and a couple of veterans down in Foxborough with some press conferences. We'll probably have some sort of video up after that, maybe a podcast. We'll let you guys know. And then Wednesday starts it all. Training camp practice number 1, 10:15 down at Gillette Stadium. We will have a reaction to that. As well as after every single practice. So keep it here, locked in, Patriots, Press Pass, and join us on the Patriots Daily Podcast as many days as possible. We're heading over to Discord right now as well. So join our Discord server, Patriots Daily Stage. If you're a member, you can come ask questions. If not, you can come still hang out and join the party. So head over to clnsmedia.com/Discord. And until next time, thank you guys for joining us. Training camp is here. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. And we will see you next time. Peace out, everyone.